Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. We're delighted to have you all here, and this should be really an interesting afternoon conversation. It's sort of tough in the program. It's after lunch. It's a little sleepy, and that's why we have this panel, because they're very interesting, dynamic, and a really important topic. Change when change is hard, the college completion agenda. My name is Mark Guerin. I'm the chair of the board of the Corporation for National and Community Service. My day job is as a college president. I'm the president of Hobart and William Smith Colleges in Geneva, New York, which is a small liberal arts college of 2,100 students in upstate New York. So I come to this from my service on the board of the corporation and some of our strategic thinking, certainly the president's clear agenda here to promote college completion. And prior to my service as college president, I was director of the Peace Corps. So I've had a perspective of the service movement, both domestically and internationally. But this is a topic, I think, that is of considerable personal interest to all of us here. American students do go on to complete college in some way. The challenge is only half complete that within 6 years. So we have this fundamental college completion challenge in our country. It affects our competitive position within the global economy when you consider that more than half of all new jobs that are being created for the next decade will require an undergraduate post-secondary degree.
This whole theme I was looking at your program, and this really speaks to me, that change agents and champions of service, pressing social problems, and measuring results. So I'd kind of like to just frame these issues associated with higher education around pressing social problems and measuring results, and how we collectively, representing different parts of the sector, can really wrestle these, because in all of this, we do have unique challenges, but we have unparalleled opportunities ahead of us in being able to really do this, because the alignment and around the importance of these issues is probably nothing that I have seen that's happened in my lifetime, nothing since the GI Bill. So it's a unique opportunity for us to focus on this. Do we have the intellectual capacity, and do we have the knowledge and skills that are going to be needed to be able to drive the kind of economy that we want, the kind of civic society we want, the kind of engagement that we want? And so it comes down to that other countries are beating us, and those of us that are in the baby boomer generation and older, we are still the most educated population in the world, but the 25 to 34s have dramatically dropped. So that's really troubling when you look at and changing demographics in the United States. So an international comparative data is one point, and the second point, to add just a little more to the data on what the employers are saying. And higher education we have been hesitant to acknowledge that higher education as the engine of the economy, because we've had and I've been I'm a proud product of a liberal arts education, that education for education's sake is incredibly meaningful. But you still need to have employability. And so what's the driver and what's that demand side pulling these students into the economy? And the data from employers will tell you that currently not only are we not producing enough skills and knowledge, but we're not producing the right kinds of skills and knowledge. So there's a mismatch, and the sectors need to at least start talking to each other. 63% of jobs by 2018 are going to need some kind of education post-high school.
I've had the chance to work with Points of Light for the past basically year on a project that I'll tell you about in a little bit, but it's today the chance to share about this book, which just come out, called Little Bets. And so I'll just tell you a couple stories about how this way of thinking that is described in this book can apply to these problems we're talking about. And so how many of you know how stand-up comedians develop new ideas? Nobody?
I read your book.
One person.
I read the book, yeah.
Okay.
So we
Are you a former comedian? Or current comedian? Perfect. Okay. That makes.
Try stuff out.
Yeah.
And they find out what works, and then they keep that and they throw stuff out.
Absolutely. And so even if it's Jerry Seinfeld or Chris Rock, when they are on HBO, they're flawless. They're perfect, right? We all think that they're just geniuses and they've come up with these ideas, but reality, they spend 6 months to a year in small clubs taking ideas that are scribbled down on sheets of paper and going one by one to see what works and what doesn't. And the first few jokes will be ones that they know are going to work because it's Chris Rock, it's Jerry Seinfeld. There's 30 or 40 people, but they're still expected to be good. And so what they'll do is they'll look very carefully at people in the audience and they'll see, is this idea grabbing people? Even if they're not laughing, are they making gestures? Are they... And they learn through this process of making lots of failures to see what is going to be the key point, the problem, the opportunity they can build on until they've developed a joke. A joke often has 5 parts to it. An act has, I don't know how many jokes, but it's 60 minutes long. So they have to get the beginning, the transitions, everything down until the close. And it's, again, when we see it, it's perfect. But this is the result of night after night going into these small clubs and trying lots of things. So the book is about how you discover new ideas by literally trying lots of different things. So here we are today, talking about education reform. And then we're going to talk about veterans issues as well. And we have these big aspirations the president's laid out. And the question is, how do you get from here to there? And you can't begin with a brilliant idea. I mean, if you look at the research, you just can't. And so the question is, okay, then what? Well, you make these little bets. And so what a little bet is exactly what Chris Rock is doing. It's an affordable, achievable step, an action that's concrete, that's specific, that gives you the chance to learn, gives you some feedback that you then build into the next phase. And they work a little bit like building blocks. And so Chris Rock, Jerry Seinfeld, they put themselves out there night after night. They bomb, right? That's part of the process. But they're bombing in a low-risk way. So they learn from that pilot or that little bet to develop what will become, eventually, as they piece it together over time, a great act. So that's what a little bet is, a small, concrete, affordable action that you take to discover and develop ideas. What are the concrete opportunities that you can use to try things that may or may not work, but that are targeted in this direction of the high aspiration, and that can give some measurable results, some learning, some building block, as Carl White describes it, so that over time you build up towards a solution. You know, this, and I'll just close on this. We've lived in a world where we think that Washington should have answers to everything for so long, this top-down decision-making, and it doesn't work in a policy-making world as complicated as ours. And so it's an exciting time to be here, because it's a world of social entrepreneurship. It's a world where you're out there making little bets every day. And the people who are going to solve the national problems are going to be working in the grassroots, just like you are. And that is the reality. And that's the only hope we have for solving some of these big problems. And I think, you know, you'll comment on this more, Mark, probably, but you know, we have to think more about how do we come up with bottom-up solutions to problems. And that's exactly what this book addresses and what your work addresses. And so as you think about these little bets, which are the ones that you can make to contribute to what will ultimately become what Toy Story was for Pixar? A large solution to a problem that couldn't have been imagined with a plan or an ingenious idea at the start.
What I would like to do is talk about the Corporation for National Community Service and our big investment in veterans and military families in the context of the little bets. And the programs that we fund at the corporation are as much programs as they are a process by which we can make small bets at the community level. The corporation's fundamental idea is if there's a problem, and that problem can be solved by human capital, and that human capital could be in the form of an AmeriCorps member or a senior Corps volunteer, that's where we can make a difference. But what we've done is decentralize that decision process to the local level, because we fully understand that we are only as good as our grantees, and our grantees at the local and community level often know the problem better than we do, and they often know what the solution is better than we do as well. So this is a fundamentally aligned to what Peter has mentioned. In AmeriCorps, much of our funding occurs through our state commissions, and it's our state commissions that have been the engines of creativity and ingenuity in AmeriCorps. And so right now in AmeriCorps, around 1% of our funding is in the veterans and military families area. And yet veterans and military families are one of our 2 top strategic focus areas. So we are making a large investment, but the way we're doing it is through these small bets. So if you think about our strategic plan, its emphasis is on impact. But I think one thing to consider is that in the area of veterans and military families, we've actually paused on that and lowered the requirement to allow a lower access of entry, to allow people to experiment, to allow people to take risks and potentially, it's about controlled risk and allowing people to strive for success rather than being afraid of failure. What AmeriCorps is about, though, often is not about the federal government reaching down and telling people what to do. It's empowering communities to organize themselves. And that's what the AmeriCorps members who are part of this Vet Corps do. They create veteran-friendly campuses by creating spaces where veterans can meet and interact and talk. And there's been some research from Stanford about the importance of peer mentoring in the completion of higher education. And this is what they do, an informal system. And it forms very naturally. I was talking to one of the AmeriCorps members who's a military spouse, and after the training, she brought her husband who had just come back from Iraq. And in the process of just chatting over pizza afterward, he unloaded. He basically talked about all of his experiences for the first time in front of her. And she talks then about having gotten her husband back that night. And I think that's what this peer mentorship can create. And that happens very naturally when you give, when you empower individuals. And this has been a small bet that we've created. And my goal is to try to create this small bet, and through the competitive process that AmeriCorps represents, to try to replicate that process elsewhere.